Okay, hello and welcome to another Mental Health Awareness Week chat show with Michelle and myself, and we have some special guests as well come on board tonight. You want to introduce yourself? Maybe go for Douglas firstly.
Okay, hi, I'm Douglas Crichton, Probationer Minister, Cumbria Link with Largs St John's, and involved in the organisation and running of the Living Room project in Largs.
Jonathan?
I'm Jonathan Fleming. I'm the Minister at Cumbria and St John's and Largs, so I work very closely with Douglas, not only in both the churches but also in the organisational team of the Living Room as well.
Kathleen?
Hi, I'm Kathleen. I'm a funeral celebrant and I'm a will writer and estate planner, and I'm also a volunteer at the Living Room in Largs.
Michelle?
Hello again. So I'm Michelle. I'm Michelle. By day, I'm a community link worker, and by night, I am a member of the volunteer team for Open the Shuttles support group.
My name's Eddy Gemmell. I'm the host, co-host for the programme, but also work for Skills Development Scotland. I'm actually a careers advisor part-time just now because I'm hopefully retiring quite soon, and also I own the Ayrshire Film Company. But anyway, yesterday's show, we kind of introduced ourselves and talked about what the idea was for the week and how we're going to plan it. And you felt that we should talk about bereavement tonight, and you've invited guests along with their expert sort of background and support. So maybe, Michelle, you want to maybe kick off and talk about maybe bereavement, the impact it's having with some of your group, and maybe introduce and bring others into the conversation.
Yeah, I think obviously bereavement is hard at any time. As we all know, losing a loved one is one of the hardest things that you have to deal with in your entire life. But obviously at the moment with the COVID-19 going on, not being able to grieve properly, the reducing funerals and being able to see your family, safely and things like that, I thought it was really important. Number one, nobody, as me and Eddy used to do years ago, were taboo Tuesdays. I thought we'd touch back on that. Yeah. It seems to be a subject that it's important and it's a thing of daily life, but it's something that people don't really want to talk about. So I really wanted to get it out there, and speak about it. So I think one of the first ones we're going to is Douglas, who is part of the Living Room. They also have like a bereavement programme going on, and their phone line open at the moment, which is really great up in Largs. Is a great support. So if we could pass over to Douglas, that would be great.
The Living Room partners with an organisation, Care for the Family, and we had about 18 volunteers trained before we opened the doors. Trained not to give folk the answers, but to journey with people who are suffering bereavement and loss in its widest possible sense. In Largs, it's an interesting community that we've got. Yes, there are lots of older people, but they suffer loss in a slightly different way than just bereavement. If people move away for university or family move away for work reasons, people suffer loss as well as just bereavement through death. So from that point of view, we've got people who journey with a group on a Thursday afternoon before lockdown happened, but they journeyed with them, yes, and that was through death, through loss. However, we've got others who receive support in how to come up with this new normal, and that's the expression that Care for the Family use quite a lot in their work. It's about dealing with a new normal. So our telephone teams just now, what they're doing is offering support, being able to, it's not a new normal, it's a temporary new normal, we would like to think, but they're having to adapt, and not seeing people on a daily basis, that is a form of loss and it is a form of bereavement. And particularly with Mental Health Week falling slap bang in the middle of lockdown, we did feel it was hugely relevant when Michelle had invited us to speak tonight about that. Also, children and young people who suffer bereavement and loss in the family, we want to be able to support them. So it's not about us saying, because we come from a church, we know exactly what to do. We sought the expertise from those who have a background and those who have a knowledge, so that we come with some degree of credibility. And it's not just something that we do on a whim. We, as I say, there are 18 of us who will be able to journey with people who are dealing with loss, to be able to get them to expand their capacity to be able to deal with it. They talk about it being a ball, and the ball won't go into the vessel because the vessel's an egg cup. But by the end of a process, we'd like to think they were putting it into a basin. Their capacity's increased. We're not diminishing the loss. We're not diminishing the bereavement and the person that they are missing. What we're saying is their capacity increases to be able to cope with that. So that's what the living room seeks to do. It's not to give answers. It's not to tell people what to do. It's really just to journey with them.
God, I sometimes come up and have TVs and sit with them as well. I miss that because that's the beauty of the community, you know, that we do have up in the North Coast and that we've seen in Largs. I know that the group on a Thursday was meant to be a kind of temporary measure, but they kind of took it on board and it ended up weekly, you know, and it's just amazing.
You can see, I mean, people, the length of time grieving takes. It could be days, weeks, months, years. Do you experience that at all?
Process is different as well. I think that there are a number of courses which are out there to support people in bereavement and loss. And week 1, we are going to talk about this. And in week 2, we're going to talk about this. Humans don't fit into a textbook process, I'm afraid. And therefore, that's why we have a team of people who can journey with groups. Now, that might be that they start off where there's 2 or 3, but different needs are met at different points in the journey. And that is very much what we want to do. It's to be responsive to individuals. It's not about saying it's a one size fits all. And you're absolutely spot on, Eddie. It's not that we have a process that we need to follow and to stick to. It's not a script. It's humans dealing with humans. It's not a program for program's sake.
One of the things we talked about last night, Michelle, was people with mental health issues. What you tend to find, people tend to box them and say it's mainly unemployed or people who are poor or so or in poverty. But it's not. It doesn't work that way. I mean, you guys have experienced that. I've seen you shaking your head there, Jonathan. Well, obviously,
mental health has no discrimination who it comes and creeps up and gets. It can get anybody, regardless of the richness, the poorness. And obviously, we would have seen, you know, this year we lost Caroline Flack, you know, a very young, talented young lady who went through something through the social media that got her so low that she decided to take her own life. That was a big shocker to the world, I think. There's been loads of other people, but that, and you know, before we went into lockdown, there was this be kind and be this and whatever. So hopefully when we come back out at that'll still be remembered. But it does, it can pick anybody and it can creep up in you at any time.
And Jonathan, your background as well, I mean, you come across people from different walks of life coping with something like this, a very difficult period. I mean, what do you offer?
Just very similar, in a very similar way that the living room seeks to offer an opportunity to journey with someone. And obviously, as a minister, one of the other journeys that you walk on, very similar to what Kathleen does in her capacity as a celebrant, is when you're in the funeral process with a family, you're walking with them at a very privileged position, because you're welcomed into a family's life or an individual's life when they are arguably at one of their lowest points in their life, and they allow you in to share the stories of their loved one, to share how they're feeling, and to give you the honour of celebrating that person's life as fully as they will allow you, with the stories they share and the experiences that they share and the picture that they paint of that person. And you try and take all that away and put it onto a canvas and deliver a fitting tribute to that person. And then the thing is, you don't clock off 1 minute after you've delivered the funeral service. You're either checking up to make sure they're doing all right, or, as has been the case since the living room's inception, you've been able to say, well, there are people who want to walk with you beyond this, and that you're not alone, and we don't complete the transaction. We are with you for as long as you need us. And it's not just me, because I'm not the expert, and like everyone else, I don't have the answers, but we walk with them every step of the way, and encourage other people to walk with them as well, because it can be such a solitary process. And particularly just now, there's been a couple of other elements that have sort of crept in because of COVID-19. There's been that sort of anticipatory grief, where they know that someone is, approaching the end of their life, and while there's so much uncertainty and anxiety, that there's the added problem that you're not able to be with them in certain circumstances, where you can't be with them at the end of their life, where you would have otherwise maybe had an opportunity to say goodbye. And that has a huge scarring effect on a lot of people, because that's something they feel robbed of, an opportunity to say goodbye to a loved one. But then on top of all of the other pain, there's that shock that comes with the inability to mourn with your friends and your loved ones in the same way as you would have done had there not been restrictions in the number of people that could be present in a crematorium or at a graveside. That you're being, again, there's this sort of feeling of being robbed or denied opportunities that you may have had in other circumstances. But then there's then a secondary loss. I think Douglas hit the nail on the head. That term loss is so much wider than bereavement, because it's not just the loss of a loved one, it's all of the other components that come with it. And there's a secondary loss, because when we return to some degree of normality, whatever that new normal will be, it's that shock that when you return to that normality, you're doing it without people beside you who you've maybe not been able to see, or you've not been able to mourn, who have lost their lives through this pandemic, and you've not been able to be at their funeral service or whatever. And suddenly, when this new normality returns, there's all these other layers to the situation, and that's where a bereavement support is so important, because there's so many different skill sets, so many different people who are able to walk with them in that, and not follow some prescribed course. Just saying, one of our token lines is from a song which is very important to the living room, and it's we were just saying, look, we're here for you.
How do we support I would say, probably what you're saying there is probably there's going to be a shockwave.
Yes.
Whenever this all finishes, hopefully it finishes fairly soon, all of a sudden there's going to be a shockwave of people bereaved. But the bereavement is not only for people who we've lost, it's probably a change of life as well, and that mental impact it's had on people.
I think there's going to be a huge, it's almost like a battery just now, that we're charging this up, and that when we return to whatever the next normal is going to be, that needs to be discharged in some way, shape or form. And it's about having the right support and the mechanisms in the right place. It's a bit like whenever somebody finds a World War II ordnance on a beach. There's a process and a due procedure that's followed that enables people to be kept safe. And I think there are some who will cope remarkably well just now, but it's only afterwards, as you say, Eddie, when people suddenly realise we're journeying with people that are no longer there. And that there is a challenge for us at the other end. When we come out of this, it's about making sure that the support networks are there. And I know Michelle does an awful lot of work in the community as well, because there's a knock-on impact. Right now, there was the loss of people, but what if that was the main earner? What if that was the source of income? So the living room, dealing with children, families and young people, the living room dealing with bereavement and loss, as well as financial issues, which is what we've got to focus on in terms of our project planning just now. Mm-hmm. Bereavement is part of all of this, and the loss that can be felt with people if it's been that they've been laid off work, if they've had to leave family because of lockdown and isolation and shielding, that has an impact as well. And I think you're talking about the ripple effect. It's going to have a shockwave thereafter, but it's about making sure that all these community groups, whether it's the church in collaboration along with Michelle and other groups in the community, it's about making sure people have somewhere where they can go and say, I'm not okay, and about removing that stigma. It's okay not to be okay.
I was just going to say, I get the feeling that some people are almost feeling forced to move on from their loss quicker at the moment, because there's so much else going on. It's almost like, we've got to get on with this, and that feeds into that shockwave as well when the normality returns. There's a big thing about in the life cycle that in order to, through life, you gain different labels and descriptions. And in order to gain these labels and lose these labels, you go through a series of rituals. And some people are being denied these rituals in the way that they had prepared for them, or maybe envisioned them or visualized them. And so when normality returns, there's all this emotional baggage, this mental anguish, this pain, which is going to, for some, realize itself in ways we're going into unknown territory here. But the most important thing that we do is we do it with an open mind, not with textbooks in front of us, but just our hearts open and our ears open to say, how can we help you?
Kathleen, I was going to ask you something, Kathleen. You've been a celebrant. You'll be dealing with families and bereavement as well. Obviously, you're meeting the families before the funeral and setting it up, hopefully preparing them for a journey. But have you noticed a big difference since COVID in the families and the sort of funeral approach?
It's different in the aspect of I can't go and visit, and I really miss the face-to-face. I don't think any video or any phone conference takes place of a face-to-face where your true empathy and support can come across for families at their grieving time. So for me, it's quite cold because we're actually just speaking over the phone, or in this situation where maybe people aren't used to technology. So it's taken a personal aspect of it away, which is another aspect of being in isolation, lockdown. Then there's the, who can we get to come along? How do we choose? But Uncle so-and-so or Auntie whatever, they would love to come. But unfortunately, they can't come because they're in isolation. So what do we do? So it's about, as Jonathan and Douglas have said, it's about being on the journey with them and asking them, in the situation, what would they have wanted? And how can we get it as close to that? Or if not as close to it right now, we work within the practicalities of what we are permitted to do. And at a later stage, I am more than happy to come along to them, and they can do a memorial service with the friends and families and people that they would have had there. And we can redo this maybe when it's spreading of the ashes or something. So it's giving them a bit of hope that there's maybe an opportunity at some point to be able to have some sort of goodbye, a celebration, and that option's still there for them. So you're hoping that gives them a bit of comfort to take them through the next few days that are coming.
Can I just say, there was
go ahead, Michelle.
A close friend, I don't want to say names or anything like that, but they'll know. So we lost a close friend from school a few weeks ago, and because he was young and whatever, there wasn't that chance, as you say, to say goodbye. So his close friends all got together and spoke with the family, obviously just a phone call, and doing things differently. So what we had done was, in his final journey, the street was filled. Obviously social distancing was there, and the street was filled, and they clapped when he passed. You know, it was upsetting but so touching at the same time, that so many people walked around, you know, and that is something that's maybe, that would never happen, you know, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, you know, it would have been a funeral. So it was a wee bit different, very, very touching. Plus, people were off work, people were off, so there was probably a bigger response than there would have been in a normal 95 day. But it was so, so touching. But at the other hand, as you say, they don't get, you know, there was just the funeral car, there was no cars behind, there was only the certain amount of people and whatever, but it was still a nice touching thing to do for someone. So that's the kind of differences I've seen. And the clap was just, I know we clap for our heroes, we're clapping for our NHS, we're clapping for our key workers. He was one of the guys, so he deserved that clap.